Oh, hey, didn't see you there. In today's video, I sat down with Jesse, an illustrator at KickCharge, to discuss his logo design workflow. We cover things like what programs he uses, how he pitches concepts to clients, and where he draws inspiration. I hope you enjoyed today's video.
So I start out with Procreate, and I use an iPad to sketch and come up with those initial ideas. I'll thumbnail sketch, just a bunch of small doodles basically is how every project starts. We do that so that it's very time efficient. You're not trying to come up with details for a concept that's not going to work. You get the outline first and then you know, oh, this will work or it won't. I typically use Dribbble, which is a huge artist resource, especially for designers. There's all kinds of creative content there, everything from typography to illustration, 3D stuff, every area of the industry is kind of showcased there. So that's awesome, place to start for even just looking at colors, looking at shapes, trying to get the mind in the mode of whatever style you're trying to render in the sketch. Interestingly, a lot of our own portfolio serves as our inspiration for other brands in terms of just setting up a style. We'll use that as a reference during our kickoffs with clients. We ask them in their brief process to list a few brands that they liked from the portfolio to kind of try to get a sense of the style that they envisioned for the brand. The brief is always a huge part of the process because I think it allows us to kind of get a glimpse of the personality of the client, what they envision for the brand, if anything. Sometimes clients are just totally happy to let us go to work and be creative, and then they're happy with what comes out of that process. Sometimes, they're a little more hesitant or nervous about what that's going to look like, and so the brief helps them to try to communicate what they think about what they envision. I've had projects go, we'll start out with 30 small sketches, very small, very scribbly, just starting with the basic bones of the idea. And then I've had a few that just really come together in 2 or 3 small sketches. But typically we're trying to develop, and the rest of the illustration team is trying to develop 2 to 3 really strong concepts that kind of rise to the top of the process. And then, from there we'll go through and pick the ones that we feel work the best with all the parameters that are set out for the project, and those become those initial concepts. And then once that process is done, I'll jump into usually Adobe Illustrator. That's my vectoring software. That's where all the layout happens for vehicles. Typically at the stage that we start to add color is really when we'll jump off of the initial sketches and into Illustrator. And then I'll also use Photoshop intermittently to kind of adjust colors, to adjust sketches, things like that, prior to vectoring. Color is always really interesting. We always kind of dictate the first part of our color selection on the market. What can that space stand to have more of, or what would be more disruptive or stand out there? Sometimes that's influenced by the location in the country or the area that the company's from. If it's more coastal, maybe we work in some elements that, factor those things in or kind of represent the area. Or it could be just looking at their space, identifying what's going to be really loud and disruptive in the market, and then trying to put those colors into place there in a way that's going to be really recognizable. Typically, we lay out the concepts in kind of a 1-by-1 slide presentation where we'll go through and just kind of talk about our rationale, our thought process, how we arrived at the concept, why we think it's going to work in their space, what makes it strong, what makes it sticky. Those things are all major factors, but we'll lay them out in basically the logo and then the logo on a vehicle to show kind of a live canvas of how that could look with a background and with not just white color behind it. So it gives them an idea of, how that could turn into other branded material. I think that's, it's usually just satisfaction to get it from, kind of the early stages of the project when none of this was in visual form at all to a finished product that they're happy with and that we know is going to work well. Sometimes it's relief because you're trying really hard, you're putting a lot of mental resources towards kind of developing these ideas and making sure that they're strong, making sure that they're going to work the way you want them to. So when you get it to the finish line, I think it's just a mixture of, it's definitely we're happy to see the finished brand in its final form, and then we're excited. I think there's a lot of excitement as well to see what it becomes, because then the vehicle wraps, happen at some point after that part of the process. Then the rest of their collateral happens, and then we can kind of see the brand come to life out in the wild and actually begin to market for the company.